Welcome everybody in the room and in person to the Heartland Federal Partners Grant Writing Workshop. I hope you all clicked on the right workshop if you are online, not that you're disappointed here. I'm Sabina Martin. Technical notes. So if you are online and you're experiencing technical difficulties, there is a number on the screen. Please dial that and Sherry will help you. Email address is there too. I would recommend not using that. That might not be quite as fast. And you just heard the presentation is being recorded and will be later on available on the K-State tab website. I think most of the presentations are already uploaded there. There might be 3 that are missing, but they will be uploaded, I will think, by tomorrow. Zoom basics, I think everybody online is probably very familiar with that. You all should be muted online. Just make sure you really are muted. I mean, we don't want to hear your dishwasher running or something. That always happens to me. Ours happens to be kind of old, and if I don't close my office door, people might hear that. Make sure your video is turned off just to conserve bandwidth. Also make sure that your participant name jives with the name that you registered with, because I think we are sending out certificates of participation, so we need to reconcile that. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will monitor that and then answer questions as we go along. So, okay, here's today's agenda, also available online, of course, on the website. So we have kind of a full day. So again, thank you for everybody participating and taking a good chunk out of your day to be here and online. That was the housekeeping part, I think. Let me just see. Yeah, and then the questions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce first Jennifer Morris, my partner in crime here. Without her and Idalis, just wave Idalis. This would not have been possible, so thank you very much. And Jennifer is the section chief section manager, I don't know how. Let's help me out here. It's the Pollution Prevention and Sustainable Materials Management section. It's just very long, but here she is.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabina. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the Division Director for the Land and Chemical and Redevelopment Division, DeAndre Singletary, who is just returning to us after a stint as the Deputy Regional Administrator for EPA Region 7, after also being on a year as the Air Radiation Division Director. So DeAndre brings to us today his perspectives as a person who has seen a lot of EPA in executive management over the years. And so I want to bring DeAndre Singletary up to give us and kick us off today with our training.
So first of all, good morning to everyone, those in the room, and then also want to say good morning to those that are joining us virtually online. As Jennifer said, I am DeAndre Singletary, and I'm the Division Director for the Land, Chemical, and Redevelopment Division, and this is my permanent job. Even though I've served the agency in several other capacities over the last 14 months or so. But here at Region 7, we are a 4-state region where we serve communities in Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri, as well as non-federally recognized tribes here. So welcome everyone to the 2024 Heartland Federal Partners Annual Grant Writing Workshop, co-hosted by KSU Technical Assistance to Brownfields or KSU TAB. Today marks a return to in-person training as we merge the COVID-era webinar series with the past and provide a full-day hybrid training. It is great to see people, for sure, and while this may make for a long day, I would like to encourage our virtual participants to please try and hang in there. A full day virtual is can be tough, but please definitely come back after lunch. And there's a lot that we have in store for all of you who are participating today. Our regional administrator, Meg McCollister, could not be here today due to other commitments, but she's a strong advocate of communities, combining federal resources from various federal sources to meet and complete the needs of the communities that we serve here in Region 7. Today, we bring together more federal partners than ever before to speak about their programs as historic funding to serve the disadvantaged and underserved communities in a variety of new ways. And so we hope that through this workshop, you'll gain the skills and confidence necessary for writing, submitting, and successfully managing federal grants that will improve capacity building and environmental and public health results in your communities. A big part of EPA's strategic plan is integrating equity and environmental justice into all aspects of our work. This direction prevails at EPA and applies to most federal agencies as well. One of EPA's priorities is to take immediate and affirmative steps to improve early and more frequent engagement with pollution-burdened and underserved communities affected by agency rulemakings, permitting, and enforcement decisions and policies. And consistent with the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, consider and prioritize direct and indirect benefits to underserved communities in the development of requests for grant applications and in making grant award decisions to the extent allowed by law. Holding events like this grant writing webinar series and continuing to engage with all of our communities in rural and urban areas is a priority for this agency. And I'll just add that it's always special and rewarding to me when in this region we can provide some of those resources that the federal government has to offer here in the Midwest. And I just recognizing that a lot of resources go to the East Coast and the West Coast is great that when we can build the capacity here in the Midwest. So there are a lot of funding opportunities available. Help us to make sure that resources aren't left on the table or miss the Heartland region. Take and apply these lessons and partner with others for your organizations and communities. Before we begin, I want to recognize and thank our state and federal partners who were integral in the planning of the series, including, again, K-State TAB, our EPA region states, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, the Health Resources and Services Administration, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the United States Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. Again, I just want to say thank you for your time today, and I will pass it back to Sabina Martin.
Let me introduce to you Myesha Kennedy. She is a public health analyst with HRSA, and I always have to kind of see what this acronym stands for. It's the Health Resources and Services Administration. So Myesha is with the Region 7 office here in Kansas City. So you can actually visit her if you have questions, and I'm sure her contact information and email and phone number will be on the last slide of her presentation. And
Apparently this is a rolly
Yeah.
to advance.
Okay.
Roll up and down.
Up and down, okay.
all right,
I'm gonna click it
get
in.
away.
Can I do it like that? All right,
Does it work?
yeah. All good. Thank you all so much. Good morning, everyone. My name, like Sabina said, is Myesha Kennedy. I'm a public health analyst with the Health Resources and Services Administration. Similar to the EPA, we have regions within HRSA as well. So serving Region 7, again, which includes Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Iowa. I want to thank the EPA and KSU TAB for allowing us to once again be a part of this grant series. So the purpose of my presentation today, I'm going to do a brief overview for HRSA just to make you aware of what it is that I do, but then I'll get right into the federal grant application process. And this application process is not for HRSA specifically, it's for all federal grants, okay? So it's applicable to everyone in the room and to our virtual attendees as well. If you have any questions, you feel free to put them in the chat. I might miss them, but I'm going to rely on Sherry to kind of nudge me if I miss a chat question. But feel free to do that. So the Health Resources and Services Administration is one of the 12 operational divisions within inside of the U.S. Department for Health and Human Services. We have a mission to really improve health equity and achieve decrease health disparities across the nation. We achieve our mission through the use of 90 different programs that serve people who are economically or geographically isolated or medically challenged. Our HRSA priorities serve those with low incomes, people living with HIV, pregnant women, children, parents, rural communities, transplant patients, if you can believe that, and then also the health workforce. So those 90 different programs that I mentioned, they really focus in those areas. We give a lot of grants specifically related to the programs in those focus areas. This is our organizational chart. Again, I said 10 regions. I serve Region 7. I specifically serve in the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs, or IEA. We have a lot of acronyms in the federal government. IEA is one of the components of HRSA, but we also have other bureaus and offices within the region as well, like our Bureau of Health Workforce or the Maternal Child Health Bureau. My job really is to serve on the ground, so I'm a HRSA ambassador. I'm the one that you'll see going out and doing grants workshops or putting on presentations just to make people aware of what it is that we do within the region. I also provide technical assistance, so meeting with you, your organization, and having a discussion about what it is that you're wanting to achieve in your community, and then me going and doing the work to search and look for different opportunities for you to apply for. That could also look like connecting you to my EPA colleagues or my colleagues within HUD or the U.S. Department of Agriculture. No, that's okay. So similar, like I said, my function really is to serve as an ambassador and liaison. That could also look like outreach and education, and then public health issues. So another part of my job is also to be aware of what's going on in the region so that we can address it. Similar to, COVID is not a very good example, but I like to say I didn't work for them when COVID was going on. But yeah, so public health issues, just identifying the needs in the region and being able to help when help is needed. Okay, this slide we'd like to just show, we do a lot of different things out in the community. I won't say too much more about it. If you would like to get connected with HRSA, my contact information will be at the end of these slides, and we'll move on. So the federal grant application process, you can get a grant from a lot of different places, right? You can get a grant from the state, you can get a grant from the federal government, and you could also get a grant from foundations. Again, my presentation is going to solely focus on that federal grant application process. There are a couple of different steps within this process, and so we'll take it one step at a time. The first step is registration. There are two places that you'll need to register. Grants.gov is a site that's operated by HHS that houses information on over 1,000 different federal grant opportunities. Before applying for grants on grants.gov, you must first register with the System for Award Management, also known as SAM. SAM is also a government-wide registry for organizations that are doing business with the federal government. Uh-oh, it is very sensitive, so I need to be careful with that. These two systems, they share information. So what I mean when I say that is you will automatically be prompted to create a login.gov account. You'll use the same email that you use for your login.gov accounts for SAM and grants.gov. That login.gov account connects both of the systems, so you don't have to keep track of multiple usernames, okay? And what I also mean by this is the information that you're receiving within SAM will be information that you need to plug into the grants.gov system. And there are a couple of things that I'll mention to you, like that unique entity identifier number. You will really need to write that down. You'll need it in the grants.gov system. You'll need it to write it down on your grant application. And a common mistake that people make is that they don't have the number, they write it down wrong. This number is linked to your organization, but we'll get into that in the next slide. I'll throw some tips and tricks in as I go along. This registration process can take up to 60 days. For most federal agencies, and this will be a little bit more HRSA specific, you have about 45 to 90 days to actually submit your grant application. And if this registration process, if you've never registered in SAM.gov, it can take up to 60 days. if it's a 45-day limit for your application, that's over the time, right? No federal organization is going to extend the deadlines for their grants because you didn't register. So my recommendation is that you go ahead and register, even if you're not interested in applying for any federal grants this year. If you are registered, you don't have to worry about that process taking long when you're wanting to apply for a federal grant. So we'll get into the SAM system. In SAM, again, you're obtaining that unique entity identifier. It's a 12-character alphanumeric identifier that's assigned to each organization. It's what identifies your organization. Registration in SAM is going to require a lot of different information, certificates, different representations. They have a checklist on their website that will go through everything you need when you're registering for SAM.gov. Organizations need to designate a person who's going to do this process, and that person is called the e-business point of contact, or the e-biz POC. It can take up to 7 to 10 business days to fully complete the registration process just for that person specifically. So keep these days in mind. I like to tell people to work backwards from the deadline of your grant application. If your application is due December 10th, work backwards and say, okay, I need to allot at least 10 days for this. I need to allot 10 days for this. So maybe it's due in December. Maybe I'm saying in, what month is this? October, September. I'm going to make sure we have all of our registration information. I'm going to make sure that I have designated my e-business point of contact by September 17th. Like, that's what I mean when I say work backwards, okay? Also like to note, there's no fee for registering with any federal system. So the SAM.gov system and the grants.gov system, they do not ask you to pay to register. There are sites that exist that do. They are scams. And I have gotten some feedback when we do these grants workshops that people have paid before. That's not the federal government. So exit out of that, report that website. That's not real. So you've received in SAM your unique entity identifier number. The e-business point of contact has been designated, and we're going to keep going through the SAM.gov system. This e-business point of contact is going to create also a grants.gov account, but within the SAM system, you're going to be asked to create a marketing partner ID number. This is a password that you make up. We don't give it to you. You make it up, and you'll need it when you're wanting to log in and approve profiles in the grants.gov system. And when I say you, I mean the e-business point of contact, okay? The e-business point of contact's role is to administer who has the authority to work on grants. These people are called the authorized organization representatives. You can have more than one AOR. I understand that not all organizations have 10, 15 people that can work on a grant application. Sometimes you're an organization of one. So you can be the e-business point of contact and the authorized organization representative, but you still need to designate yourself as that role in the grants.gov system, okay? And then I want to note also, the e-business point of contact is not going to be the person that's submitting the grant application, unless, again, you're that party of one. They are really just the administrator for the grant in the SAM.gov system. They're the administrator for in the grants.gov system as well. You have to renew each registration in SAM and grants.gov annually. They will be the person who's doing that work. We do recognize that there is turnover, which is why we have an annual registration process, because we try to catch people who leave the organization and make sure we have the most up-to-date information, because there are instances where the person who has the authority to create these systems has either retired or they no longer work with the organization, and sometimes they've even passed away. SAM.gov can help you reattain your authority over the SAM.gov system if the person who was supposed to renew annually no longer works at your organization for whatever reason. So they have a help center. You can call that number and they'll be able to work with you to obtain that authority again. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so once the e-business point of contact has designated those AORs within the grants.gov system, the AOR can then log into grants.gov, and they will also need to create a profile in the grants.gov system. This profile will then need to be confirmed by the e-business point of contact. We do this just to make sure who the e-business point of contact designated to work on the grant is the person that created the profile in the system. When registration is approved, then the AORs, they can then have the authority to go in and work on federal grant applications. Grants.gov, they have a couple different resources for you. Everything that I'm saying to you is on their website. It's also located in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which is your actual grant application, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later in the presentation. But I did want to note that grants.gov, they have a call center as well to support you. If you run into any hiccups within this process of registration, they can help you in the grants.gov system and in the SAM.gov system as well, because they are connected. I've called them personally on behalf of some stakeholders. They are really helpful. They're actual people, so you're not calling and getting a robot, which I think is really helpful. But they're available 24/7. Through email and phone. Okay, so you've already completed the registration process. You have your unique entity identifier number. You've designated the e-business point of contact who is registering in both systems, SAM and grants.gov. The e-business point of contact has delegated who's authorized to work on your federal grant application. And now you actually begin the work of applying for federal grants. There are a couple of tools that can help you do this. One of those tools being Workspace. It's an application within the grants.gov system that organizations, grant teams can use when applying for federal grants. But it's basically a tool. You can go in simultaneously. Multiple people can go in and work on the grant application, okay? It has each of the sections of your Notice of Funding Opportunity within the Workspace system, so you're not having to wait for somebody else to do their part before you log in and do your part. Everyone can do the work that they're supposed to be doing on the grant through the Workspace system. You don't have to use it. It's just a tool that we like to promote because it's available. But you could just as easily also copy your grant application in a Word document, in a Google Doc, and do the same thing, okay? We do have a video here for the Workspace and how to set it up, so I'll let that play if it works. And if it doesn't, you'll get a copy of the slides. Did it switch screens? Okay.
Just need to share the different screen. This one.
Yep.
Is there sound to it?
There is a sound to it.
I don't know how to share sounds.
That's
in
okay.
Zoom
We're gonna,
meetings.
we'll just
Sorry.
move on. Yeah, that's fine. We'll move on. You all can, if you're interested in Workspace and what it looks like to set up the system, this video is available. You can also just go to the grants.gov site and click on their resources, and it'll also pull up this resource for you. Thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Okay, so that we went through how to register, that registration process, and now I'll talk a little bit about where and how to find funding. But before I move on, do I have any questions so far? Sorry, go ahead. I'm listening for the online folks.
This is going to be one. Is it on?
Okay, so back to the registration.
Yep.
If you're a non-federal entity, it said we would need a notarized letter. So
Who said that?
it was on there. It's on the presentation.
No. So if any entity can apply for, let me go back to my slides, and you pointed out to me.
Right, it said any entity can apply, but if you're a non-federal entity, a notarized letter,
Okay, yeah, sorry.
right? And so I just want to know what information are we putting in the letter?
I don't know. I'll have to reach out, and can I get your information, then I can let you know? Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
Any other questions in the room? Nothing? Online?
The only thing online was that someone said they do use the connection help, yay. And they acknowledged your thing about the scam.
Okay, well, good, yeah, good. And I will get back to you.
Oh, wait,
That's not a
wait.
question that I've gotten yet, so that's always helpful. It helps me do more research when I'm doing these presentations. Any other questions?
We've switched to speaker view on your questions. Wanted to make sure if you wanted to do your slideshow that way or not. We're right at the end, so I don't know if you want to keep it that way or. There we go.
Okay.
We're in spiffy.
Okay, still good?
Yep.
All
you're good.
right. All right, so then the next place, we'll go through where to find actual grant applications. I work for HRSA, so you can go on our our website and any federal grant, any federal agency's website and find grants, or you could just use the grants.gov system. All federal grants will be housed here, so if you're looking for grants from the EPA, from HRSA, from CDC, from HUD, you can type their information into the system and find what opportunities they have open. So I'll just take you through a demo of what that looks like. We're gonna click on search and it'll take us to a site that looks like this. I'm gonna put HRSA in the keyword because that's who I work for, and it'll pull up all of our grant opportunities from the Health Resources and Services Administration. Grants.gov, the difference between some federal sites and the grants.gov system is that they post opportunities that are forecasted as well as opportunities that are open currently. So forecasted opportunities, my recommendation would be to watch the dates because sometimes it's forecasted for June 27th and it's September 25th. Obviously, that opportunity is not open yet. So all federal funding is based on congressional appropriation. If Congress hasn't appropriated the funds, that's why we get those grants forecasts that are in the past. We have to wait for them to update and actually fund the program before it can open in the grants.gov system. So be aware of that. You can also subscribe to the grants.gov system. Whatever you're wanting to search for, you can search based on an organization and subscribe for all HRSA grants, all EPA grants. You can also type in keywords and subscribe if you're looking for public health grants, or maybe you're looking for environmental grants. You can type in a keyword and it'll send you from every organization all grant opportunities from based off your search there. Okay, so we're going to click on this grant opportunity, the Warren White HIV/AIDS program, and it's going to take us to a page that looks like this. This would be the same if I was looking at some other, organizations, federal grant opportunities. They all have this second page here. We're going to click on that package tab. This first page is going to just give you a breakdown of all of the information for the grant. So when it's due, how many awards they're going to be given, if there's an award ceiling. This opportunity doesn't mention an award ceiling, but that might just be because there needs to be an update. But total funding, $654 million, and they're going to give out an expected number of 52 awards. If your award ceiling is not posted, I would divide the total amount of awards by how many awards they're giving out, and that will give you an idea of what your potential award ceiling would be, okay? But we're gonna click on that package tab. It's gonna take us to a page that looks like this. You have the option to either apply or preview. My recommendation, if you've not read the actual notice of funding opportunity, then don't click on the apply button. You are actually required to read. We have an understanding that if you've submitted an application federally, that you've read the notice of funding opportunity all the way through. And it actually does say it in the NOFO that we have the understanding you have read and have a complete understanding of what it is that we're asking you to do through your application. Okay, so we're going to click on the preview tab because we've not done that yet. It's going to take us to a page that looks like this. My left side, the mandatory forms section on this slide, these are going to be everything that we are expecting you to submit, all of your attachments that are required for your grant application. Those are those mandatory forms. You have to include them, and they have to be included in order. The order, your notice of funding opportunity will tell you how we expect them to be submitted. If you don't submit all of your mandatory forms and attachments, your application will be deemed non-responsive, and you likely will not, it won't go through the process to actually be reviewed for federal funding, okay? So those mandatory forms, you can click on them, they're hyperlinks, it'll take you to another page, you can actually fill out the mandatory forms online. But for now, because we still haven't read the notice of funding opportunity, we're gonna click on download. And it's going to take us to the actual notice of funding opportunity. So I've said it a couple times. What is a NOFO? What is a notice of funding opportunity? It is a formal announcement of the availability of federal funding. The notice of funding opportunity is your grant application. It's going to provide all of the information that you need to apply for the grant. That includes the background, so that same information that was on the grants.gov site. It'll be in the NOFO, how to register, how to go through the sam.gov system and register in grants.gov. All of that information will also be included in your notice of funding opportunity, as well as your criteria. The objective review committee, these are the people that are going to be actually looking at your grant and giving it a grade. Your review criteria, it's a rubric that we offer to you for you to utilize to fill out your grant application and know. So this section is going to be scored 50 points. We tell you this is their expectation for you to receive 50 points. This is what we're looking for. So we offer that to everyone. I do want to note that HRSA, we say NOFOs, Notice of Funding Opportunities, but they could also be funding opportunity announcements, program announcements, parent announcements, requests for application, a solicitation. They're all terms that mean the same thing, okay? We just don't. I know our CDC colleagues, they use RFAs, but it's all the grant application, okay? And meaning the same thing. And then with HRSA and some of our other federal partners as well, we offer application guides. So HRSA specifically, we have the SF 424. It is a companion guide to your notice of funding opportunity. And what this is this offers instructions. So it again goes through that registration process, how to register in grants.gov and all of those things, but it's also going to give you advice in how to actually fill out the different sections. So if you're wanting to put a table in, this guide will give you templates to use for your budget justification sections. And if you're wanting to include data, this guide will help you map out how to do those things. We recommend that you pull the SF 424 that is linked inside of your notice of funding opportunity, because there are 4 different types of this companion guide. But we give the guide based off the application. So there's an SF 424 R&R for specific applications. If you're pulling an R&R application for a grant that doesn't need one, you're going to be following instructions that's not related to your grant. Does that make sense? So pull the notice of funding opportunity in the SFR 20 within side of your SF, your grant application. And then this slide just kind of goes over the information that I've already shared. If you're interested in applying for federal grants, highly recommend that you subscribe to the grants.gov system. That link at the bottom of this screen will take you to manage your subscription. So we'll go through very quickly just some different sections of the notice of funding opportunity and some things that we are looking for you to include. So the executive summary is going to provide a background on your NOFO that you're applying for. It includes, again, the purpose of the grant, your funding opportunity, the application due date, estimated number of awards. That link to the SF 424 guide will be here. Your application and submission section this is the section that states that you're responsible for reading and complying with everything inside of the NOFO and that SF 424. That is a little bit more HRSA specific. The submission section is going to outline the due dates for your applications. Some grants require you to submit them in grants.gov and another system. If you submit in one and not the other, and you have a 2-phase submission, your application will be deemed non-responsive because you didn't submit it in both places, okay? The submission section will say, phase 1 submitted in grants.gov. For HRSA, phase 2 would be submitting it within our electronic handbook system. If your application has that requirement, it will state it and help you know how to do that. The submission section is also going to include any follow-up action that's required from you if you become a recipient of the grant. And again, if you fail to comply with any of the requirements, your application will be deemed non-responsive. We host a technical assistance webinar, and this is a little bit more HRSA specific again, for every funding opportunity that we release. So it's an opportunity for you to attend that session and clarify anything within our NOFOs that don't make sense. We recognize that some of the language we use in NOFOs, RFAs, and all of the things, they're not the easiest to understand all of the time. And we at HRSA, we are actually working on simplifying and shortening some of our NOFOs to make them clear and more accessible for people to apply for. That's the submission section. We're going to go to the second half of this slide, the narrative guidance. It's the framework for your application. So this is the section you really need to pay attention to. It is the longest section within your NOFO. these are your instructions for how your application will be outlined. For this section, your application organization, precision, and clarity are very, very important. If you are unclear about the directions, you can contact an agency point of contact. You have the contact information. It's usually a phone number, sometimes an email. That's within your application. These are the people who can answer questions about the RFA or the NOFO that you're applying for. So your narrative guidance section is going to include introduction, a needs assessment, a methodology, work plan, resolution of challenges, evaluation and technical assistance support, organizational information, and then it also has review criteria attached to it. So this little box that we have on the slide, we call it a crosswalk. It has the narrative section on one side and then the review criteria on the other side. These things link together. So if my introduction, it's linked to the criteria 1, the need. The criteria 1 is going to have points associated with it. So say criteria 1 is 50 points. That means the introduction section will be worth 50 points. And my application will actually say, in this section, you should include this. And I'll kind of go through some of those sections just to explain what it is that we're looking for. So for the review criteria, HRSA has procedures for assessing the technical merit of applications. What I mean by that is we give a rubric to you and the objective review committee, the people who are looking at your grant. They get the same rubric that you do. They use that rubric to grade your grant application. So this is a process we use because it's fair. Everybody knows what the expectations are for your grant application, and you know how it's going to be reviewed up front. Reviewers will evaluate and score the merit of your application based on that criteria, and then the entire proposal will be considered and they'll give a score. So this objective review committee, it's usually 3 to 10 people that are meeting. There are 3 peers, so people like you could also be grant reviewers. And then we have people at our organization who are on the committee as well. This would be the same for HUD, CDC, the EPA. They will meet, they'll gather virtually usually, because these people are all across the country. They'll meet virtually, they'll read your application, and everybody will come to a consensus score for your grant application. And it is a consensus, so everybody needs to agree on the score of your application. And every application that is submitted to HRSA, we give feedback, and I'm sure that it is the same for other partners as well. So if you score 97 out of 100, we're gonna tell you why. If you score 50 out of 100, we're gonna tell you why in detail, okay? We do this for every application, so if you are wanting to apply for funding in the future and you got a lower score, you know how to improve for the future, and we hope that you try again. The funding preferences, I'm going to say that this is also, I'm speaking HRSA specific as well. There are some grant applications that we offer, and you want to check your NOFO if it's from some other organization, if they have a funding preference attached to it. This usually means that we're looking for something specific. So if we're wanting to fund projects that are in a rural area, the funding preference would prefer applicants who are going to be working in a rural area versus those applicants who are applying from Kansas City. Okay, the people in the rural area will get the funding first. If there's money left over and this other application did a great job, they got a high score, and we think the project will work, they would be funded second. Does that make sense? So every application is reviewed, every application is fair. We like to point that out, but those funding preferences are in place so that we can address health challenges in communities, okay? And then your award administration and your agency contacts, they are at the beginning of your NOFO, they're also at the end, they're also on the website. We list them in a couple different places. We're gonna also tell you when you'll be awarded the money, so you don't have to guess when that money will be coming to you. We'll let you know. And then this section is also going to include any reporting requirements you have. Again, this is HRSA specific. I'm sure my other federal colleagues have the same process, but that agency point of contact, you will be meeting with these project officers of the grant to report on how you're utilizing federal funds. It is a requirement of the grant. If you do not report on how you're utilizing federal funds, then we have to come, and say, hey, what you doing with our money? And we don't like doing that. I don't like doing that. So you are required to report. And there are different evaluation sections and all of those things within your grant application that will tell you what our expectations are. We have technical assistance for organizations that need help with creating evaluation measures. So that's another resource to everyone here. Even if you're not applying for HRSA specific funding, we have technical assistance centers that are automatically funded to support organizations. Okay. So going through just a little bit more of this review process, I've kind of already explained it, got ahead of myself here. But again, step one, each applicant is independently reviewed by 3 qualified reviewers, and then we tag along an additional maybe 3 to 6 people who are going to meet virtually to designate a score for your grant. And I'll keep going because I've already said that. Become a HRSA grant reviewer. I always like to promote this. It's a really legal way to cheat. I like to tell people that because you can learn what it is that we're looking for within the federal grant process, what we're looking for in grant applications. You could work for HRSA and go apply for some other federal funding, and it would be a really great experience for you to learn what federal organizations are looking for in their grant application. You cannot be a reviewer for an application your organization is submitting, but if you have any expertise, both personal expertise or work expertise, then you can apply. We train you, so you don't have to have any experience in being a HRSA grant reviewer. You'll go through a training, and you are provided a stipend for each application that you are selected to review. And what I mean by that, it's not, if you're selected to review the Rural Health Network Development Planning Grant, and there are 200, we're not giving you $300 for every 200 applications, okay? You're selected for the grant, the Rural Health Network Development Program. Regardless of how many there are, you'll get a stipend based off being selected for that program. And then this slide is just the process we've just gone through. You've submitted it. What happens after you submit it? We like to include that. I'm going to go through just a couple of tips and tricks here, and then I might back up just to go through some of those different sections of the NOFO. So we like to call them the 5 R's. The first one is do the research. I like to tell people, don't go through this process because you need the funding. Really have the understanding of like what it is I can do in my community. How will we be able to help other people if we're going to apply for this funding? Okay, if your organization financially is in need, okay, if your organization is in need and you're like, I'm applying for funding because we're broke. Probably not, probably not the best thing to include in your NOFO, okay? So do the research. This can look like looking at past notice of funding opportunities. We post past notice of funding opportunities on our website. NOFOs don't change very much from the HRSA side from year to year. So if it's something that we know is going to open, you give me a call and I'll say, hey, yeah, that's a great opportunity. I know something that you could apply for. We know that it's going to open winter 2025. Look at this past notice of funding opportunity and let me know if it's something that you are wanting to go for. And then your organization can begin the work of getting a team together. If you haven't registered, you can register before that winter 2025 date. That's what we like to include as doing the research. Also, really evaluating the cost benefit. This is going to take a lot of time. This process for the grant application is going to take time, and then the actual completion of the program is going to take time. Make sure that it's something that your staff has the capacity for, and you are required within that narrative guidance to let us know how, in that methodology section, like, do you have qualified people on staff to actually do this project? Have you done something like this in the past? Is there anything equitable? Like you can relate, yes, if we're going for this funding saying we are gonna provide kits, dental kits in our community, do you have the resources for that? Do you have the partnerships for that? You do that research because we want you to lay it out in your grant application as well, okay? And then recruit a team. This is a lot of work to do for one person. I know not everybody has the capability to recruit a team, not only for the actual grant writing. If you have a grant writer on staff, yay. But if not, recruit a team of people to go through this process. Highly recommend that if you have a chief financial officer, that he be a part of the process, because budget and a budget justification is a part of the actual grant application. The e-business point of contact, that person is usually the chief financial officer of your organization. So that's just another tip there. But you also want to recruit a team of people to do the project. At HRSA, we love collaboration. If you're a small organization, have a higher capacity if you're partnering with other organizations to do the work, okay? And I'm gonna keep going really fast because I think I'm out of time. Respond to the guidance. No? Okay, I'm good. Okay. Respond to the guidance. Use clear, concise language. Make it easy to read. Really write this application as if I know nothing about your organization because I don't. Okay, so if you use acronyms within your organization and that's common knowledge, make sure that you're defining that in your application. The objective review committee cannot come outside of your grant application and look something up if it's not clear. So what's there is there, and if we don't get it, we probably won't get it. It's probably not going to make sense. So my recommendation for this is have somebody else read your grant application, somebody that knows nothing about your organization and nothing about what it is that you're wanting to do. If it's clear to them, it'll probably be clear to the objective review committee, okay? And then reviewing your application, we like to say grant writers, they do this is their job. So you're not having to take, the advantage of having a grant writer being, you don't have to take time away from staff that have other responsibilities to go through this process. The disadvantage of a grant writer is it requires money, especially if they're not already paid on staff. You have to have money to pay a grant writer to do the great work that they do. So that's a disadvantage of that. There are some resources out there. I know that we partner with an organization, Heather Zaromsky. She's the president of it's escaping me, Deaconess Foundation, and she is a grant writer and reviewer. She hosts a lot of different technical assistance webinars. There are things that are online. I can send some resources to Sabina to send out to you all for that grant writing help. Okay. Federally, I cannot help you write your grant. It's a conflict of interest because we are the people that administer that. So we can't offer those resources a lot of the time. Writing a strong application, these are some questions that you can ask yourself. My recommendation is to start as early as possible. Again, you have 45 to 90 days to actually submit this grant application. That's a lot of work to do within that short amount of time. Follow the instructions of the NOFO. Keep your audience in mind. I've kind of already said that. If it's not clear to whoever it is that's reading it that doesn't know anything about your organization, it's not going to be clear to us. Be organized and logical. You are required that SF 424 is going to lay out time like fonts. We are really specific with like wanting headers. It's a really great way to keep your application organized. So if you're writing your narrative guidance section, say that. Whatever's laid out in your actual NOFO, if it says introduction, leave that heading so that your objective review committee knows where you are. Okay, it's a great way to keep it organized. And my recommendation, this is actually a recommendation from Heather Zaromsky. If you don't want to use that workspace tool, you can copy and paste that full narrative guidance section in your NOFO, put it in a Word document, highlight the instructions, and then write your application so you can ensure everything we've asked you to include, you've included it below, and then delete the highlighted sections before you submit your grant application. But that's a really great way to keep it organized. We require a specific font, we require page limit. So if your page limit is 80 and you submitted 100, those other 20 won't even go through the system. We only will take the 80. And if your grant application doesn't make sense with those 80 pages, which it probably doesn't because that's missing 20 pages, your application will probably be deemed non-responsive, okay? And then you are required to submit a budget justification. So you do need to show sound fiscal stability. A part of that is, have you handled the amount of funds that we're giving you? If we're gonna give you $4 million, do you have evidence that you can handle that amount of funding? If you need to hire staff, and your NOFO allows you to do that, you need to include all of that information in your budget justification, okay? And we'll do it if your grant application has a period of performance for 5 years. We want you to submit the budget justification for all 5 of those years and how you're gonna utilize that funding, okay? And if you need to hire staff in year 3, make sure it's included in the actual application. Because if you turn around and you've submitted it and we give you the money and you're like, oh wait, we need to hire someone, yeah, that's not going to be a good situation, okay? All that information needs to be included within the application. Attention to technical details, I won't go through all of that stuff. It's basically me saying, like I did earlier, that UEI number is written down wrong, or your SAM registration has expired and you have to go through this process of re-registering with the system. And then be careful with the use of attachments. If we don't ask you to attach it, don't attach it. Attach the ones we've asked you to attach and attach them in order, okay? And then my suggestion, our brains are really, really smart. They can create words that are on the page that aren't there actually. So print it out, have somebody else read it, you read it, have the team read it, everybody needs to read it, and then submit it. I recommend that you submit it at least 3 days in advance because the grants.gov system does crash. When everybody is submitting their application on the same day. You do not want to be caught up in that number of people who may not get their application read because the system is down, okay? So submit it on time being 3 days in advance. And I'm gonna just kind of go through the rest of this stuff. We have a technical assistance website for everything that I've said today, minus where to get notarized. I'm gonna go look up so I can answer the question that was asked here in the room. And then we have the links to the SF 424 here. My information is here. If you need anything from me, I am here in the region. Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions in the room? I have one, Myesha, just, it's a for example. You've got your SAM, and boy, you are so excited that you were able to change your headquarters and move up the street. Do you need to change your SAM?
Yeah, so you need to update your information. Let me say that in the mic so everyone else can hear. You do need to update your information within the SAM system. If anything changes with where you're located, your email address, anything like that, you need to update the SAM system. Now, I will say you're not getting a new UEI number. That number stays the same. It is connected to your organization. But if you have turnover and there's a new person, really, really think about, oh, we need to go in and make sure that we get the information from this person before they leave so that we can actually go through the registration process for grants. We had a situation a couple of years ago. The warden at the jail was the person in contact for the health department's grant, and it took them years to find out who had the authority for their grant. So he'd worked for the health department at a time and had moved on, and it had been 20 years. So you want to make sure that all that information is updated. And SAM they'll ping you if you're out of date, your registration is out of date. You can log into their system and it'll say check entity status, and you can go in and say, oh yes, we are good to go, or hey, we've got some things to figure out. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right. Yes, that would be great. Thanks for the great presentation and all the hints and tips. I mean, that was really good. All right, I'm up next. Whoops, I'm gonna grab this carefully. So again, I'm Sabine Martin. I'm a Kansas State University Technical Assistant to Brownfields, KSU TAP partner, and I'm going to talk a little bit about work plans or grant applications, hints and tips, pitfalls, and the like, as soon as that presentation is up. There we go. Maybe.
Just gonna click the little button.
And just for the people in the room, we have, at the latest count, I think 104 people joining online. So you're not it, only because we are kind of like a cozy group here. But yeah, there's a lot more to it. And now I fiddled with the microphone and it's moving up on me. Okay. All right. So work plan development. Let's see, here we go. So there are work plans and there are work plans, right? It kind of depends what grant you're applying for. So for example, for the EPA environmental justice grants, environmental education, healthy homes, lead-based paint grants that HUD has, the work plan is actually your application, your grant application, the proposal you are writing, describing what you want to do and how you will do it. For the EPA brownfields grants, the work plan comes after you are awarded a grant. So it's not part of the proposal, it comes after you are successful. Big difference. So for any type of grant application, these are what I would think are the first steps. So the first thing is start with a great project and not a great grant. There are some communities out there who kind of scour grants.gov for various types of grants, like high dollar amounts, does it look attractive? And then they think, wow, that's really cool, $1 million. Let's see what kind of project we have that fits that price tag. Not a great way to go. I mean, usually that's not very successful. So my recommendations, start with a great project and not a great grant. Hopefully you can marry that, but if you don't have a great project, it usually doesn't translate. Also consider, is the grant worth the money? Example, EPA brownfields grants. They are great grants. They are highly competitive. So if you have a brownfield site, for example, like 1 or 2 that you just need assessed, it might be better to go through the state programs because the application is not that long, 2 pages versus 10. Process is not competitive. It's likely that you actually get awarded it's not really a grant. I mean, basically the states will do the work for you. So kind of weigh that, and pick the right grant for the job that you want to do, for the project that you want to do. So it all needs to come together. And then after you have done that, basically come up with a strategic plan. How are you going to tackle this? I mean, grants don't write themselves. They should not be a last-minute effort. And usually you can't do it alone, the project, I mean. So identify your partners. Who is going to be critical for your project to be successful? Schedule community meetings and public notices. A lot of agencies are very keen on public participation and community engagement. I mean, EPA for sure is. So the more, the better in that realm. Make time for internal review, for approval, and Myesha already talked about that. Have people write your grant. They cannot do that if you hand them the grant like the day or the 2 hours before it's due. So you need to leave time to do so. We at TAB, we can review EPA brownfields grants, but again, I mean, our reviews, we'd like to have some time to do that. And when we give you the grant application back with our track changes, like, well, edits, not really edits, suggestions, questions, comments that we have, you may want to have time to address those too. And, it all takes time. Grants.gov, SAM.gov, we already talked about that. Myesha talked about that. Make sure you do this early. It can take several weeks for you to get the UEI number that is required now. So there's no DUNS number anymore. That was replaced by this unique entity identifier number. God, we need to keep moving this. Again, like start early. Any grant is much more work than you think. I have written some EPA brownfields grants in the past, and I don't like it. Because it's a lot of work. You need to pull a lot of statistics together. You need to pull a lot of information together, and it just takes a lot more time than you think it does. What we recommend is read successful grant applications from previous grant cycles. Most organizations have them on their website. We at TAB, we on our website have successful grant applications, EPA brownfields grant applications from the previous grant cycle and going back further. So that's always helpful to see how are things handled by other communities that were successful in their application. Not that you should copy, but you kind of get the gist as to how they handled the questions that were asked. Grant-specific partnerships need to be established early, in my opinion. I mean, you cannot go out a week before this thing is due and ask somebody to partner with you, because likely they don't have any clue what you want to do. You don't have enough time to explain it because you're madly writing. So start that early. Statistics, I already mentioned that. For EPA grants, there is a lot of statistics, I would think, a lot of facts that you need to incorporate. collect them early, especially like health-related data. Sometimes it's not that easy to get them. You need to kind of scour the web, you need to talk to different agencies to get your information to make your grant application competitive. So start that process as early as you can. And then sign up for webinars that are offered by the federal grantors, any type of granting agency, and listen to what they have to say, because usually they explain what they're looking for, if the guidelines change from year to year, if there were annual competitions. So for example, for the Brownfields grant, EPA Region 7 will have some webinars. The national webinars are, I think they're done. Yesterday was the cleanup and the RLF one, and TAB is doing some webinars in that regard as well. So take advantage of that. Yeah, be kind to your reviewer. I'm the one at TAB, among several other people, who gets to review EPA grant applications that come in for the Brownfields grant. And yeah, I mean, this 30 proposals, that's just the number I kind of randomly put there. Thankfully, hopefully nobody reviews that many in a grant cycle. EPA reviewers don't usually get that many to review either, I would hope. But be kind to your reviewer. Whatever you want to bring across, make it clear, be understandable, and be concise. The worst thing to read is a rambling application where after 3 paragraphs, you still have no clue what this person wants to convey. Have strong mission points, get across exactly what you want to do, how you want to do it, and then package that nicely in a good and compelling story. Avoid using acronyms. I mean, we all do, but those may be internal acronyms. Nobody else has an idea what that means if they're not within your organization. It's okay to use an acronym, but the first time you use them, spell them out. And then write as if the reviewer knows nothing about your community, which is likely very, very true. So think here, geographic settings, floodplains, anything, like for example, I see an application that says, oh yeah, our site is on 4th Street. Does that tell me anything? I don't even know where your 4th Street is, right? So you need to provide the context. Tell a good story. Not that easy. Mostly, I would say, look at the grant criteria. What does the granting agency ask you to do here? For specifically the Brownfields grants, there are evaluation criteria that are attached to the back of the guidelines. They tell you exactly how a section that they want you to write is evaluated. What points need to be there for you to get full score? Because all these sections have point values. Agency mission and objectives for the Brownfields grants, I mean, that's health and environment. So make sure you write towards that too. And then focus. What are the issues in your community? How is the community impacted? And what will your project do about it, right? I mean, what is the grand purpose here? Hopefully you're going to improve quality of life for your residents. And why is that so important? So usually what I say, the what, the why, the how, and the who. What is the issue? Why is this issue even there? How will you tackle it? And who will you help you do so? So that goes to the partnerships. And follow directions. I mean, that's Jennifer's line here, follow the guidelines. Do that. I mean, to the letter. If they say they want to have asthma stats, you better put asthma stats in your application. If they are not available for your community, make that point and tell that. Just simple sentence, we don't have asthma stats available. We looked and there's nothing. Pay close attention to the criteria weighting. That goes to the points. How many points is a section worth, right? Hit all the points you can. There are some people who focus first on the high value sections, like the ones with the most points in an application. Kind of depends what your personal preference is, right? I mean, for now, and I'm talking a lot about the EPA grants because the Brownfields grants, because this is the open competition period. Those guidelines are written such that it actually flows really well. There are other federal grants where that might not be the case. But I mean, again, personal preference, but always, always check against the grant-specific evaluation criteria to make sure you don't forget anything. Answer all the questions, line by line. If something doesn't apply to you, just don't omit it, because a reviewer might think, oh, well, they just read over it, and they weren't really thorough, so why should we give them money? So if something doesn't apply, say it. And be realistic. So that goes mostly to your timing of the work that you will do in your project. If I have a 3-year project, all the stuff that I propose in the proposal, in the application, can I actually accomplish that or not? If you pile too much on, I mean, the reviewers will know that, right? And if it's unrealistic, you don't score well. So there's that. A lot of times, unfortunately, first-time grant applicants are not successful, and that's nothing bad, because if you're not used how to write a grant and what to put in it, and again, I mean, especially the EPA brownfields grants are very, very competitive. It might be that you don't get it. Take advantage of the debriefs, because agencies will tell you what you did wrong, where you could have scored better, and then next time you will do better, right? Again, not a sure thing, because it's very competitive. But if you are not successful, don't just take your application from last year, slap a different date on it, and submit it again. That's not a good thing to do. Make sure your proposal follows the current guidelines. Sometimes it looks like there are no changes, but then if you really compare, there are subtle changes, and those count. So what EPA has on their website now are the changes basically highlighted from last year's guidelines to this year's guidelines. So make sure you read that if you are a repeating grant writer. So strong applications, in my mind, have well-defined issues, well-defined challenges, are focused with clear objectives, are really well-written, show community support, have a diverse set of partners, think grassroots and not only fellow agencies or entities, organizations, and convey an understanding of what it takes to make it all happen. So the reviewer gets a good feeling, yeah, this person knows what they're talking about, they know what's involved, and they would be a good grantee. I'm going to talk a little bit about community engagement, because especially for the EPA grants, that's a big one. So on this slide, and I'm not going to wade through it, and I don't expect you to read this. All of this is going to be on the website too. Just know that, I think from your end too, from the left to the right here, it's increased public engagement and impact. So it's information, consultation, involvement, collaboration, and in the end, you empower community members. You want to get to this collaborative state, because that's very important for your project to be a good one and gain traction in the community. There are still some communities out there who think, yeah, public meeting, public engagement, well, we have a council meeting that's public, and yeah, people can show up if they want to. But who goes to council meetings, right? I live in Manhattan, Kansas. If I see a televised council meeting, there are maybe like 5 warm bodies in the audience. And that's it. That's not a public meeting. That's not public engagement. So if you put something like that in an application, chances are it's not going to score well. So you need more. So here's some tools for community engagement. I put virtual and the non-virtual part on there. Virtual, that still stems from COVID. Some people are still more comfortable with that. But mix and match and do what's right for your community. This is not a one-size-fits-all. What works really well in one community to get people at the table may not work in yours. So really work with your community. Overall, I would say in-person meetings are still the way to go, but don't negate everything else. So I put the resources link here. This is from Groundworks USA, and that goes more to the virtual engagement, what you can do, and some tips. If you, for example, have a brownfield site, I don't know how well this works on your on your screen if you can see that, but that image that I put there on that sign that is there, put in the grass, it said, what would you, if I remember correctly, because I can't read that, what activities would make you come out here during lunch? Very simple sign, phone number, people could text them, and that way they gathered input, how the site should be, how the spot should be redeveloped, or you can stick a QR code on there. I mean, whatever. So just kind of sometimes think outside the box a little bit. You want your community involvement to be as equitable as possible. That means you want to include all community members. That goes for community members with disability, so think ADA accessibility. If there are people with hearing impairments, you want to make sure that they are able to attend and hear. Age, especially now with social media so big, not everybody is on social media. So do not expect if you put out an announcement for a meeting on Facebook or whatever on a web page that everybody will have access. I mean, you also want to gain input from the older population. I mean, they're part of your community as well. They may not be on social media. Culture, income, maybe you need to provide transportation for people who don't have cars. Maybe you need to provide childcare. Make sure you address your language barriers. If you have a high Hispanic population in your community, make sure you have a translator there if needed. So everybody is on the same page, everybody gets the same information and can respond accordingly. I would also add here, maybe I should have put that on that slide, people in poverty. So that's also something that needs to be addressed. Maybe some people are also more comfortable for you going in small groups. What I've done in the past too, I had little kits developed with like the meeting information. I dropped it off, like say, to the head of a neighborhood group, and it was like a self-style meeting that they did, and they just kind of brought the information back. Because there are some people who just plain are not comfortable in large groups with people they don't know. So lots of things to do. Community engagement early and often. As I said before, don't start a week before this thing is due, your grant application. Make sure you make sure that you do that early on. And again, I mean, whatever works for your community. So we at TAB are asked a lot of times to have visioning meetings. I'll talk more about that this afternoon. It's like gathering redevelopment ideas for a specific site or a corridor that the community wants to address. So this picture that I put on this slide is from Joplin, Missouri, where they organized that to be downtown at a brewery. I mean, meeting-wise, for a location, we leave this up to the community, but as a community, select something that's accessible, that is known, where people actually like to go. That helps a lot. And don't forget about your partners. For this application, I mean, they may have a different group of constituents that should be engaged, not only their organization per se, but all the people they serve. Okay, here's a little bit more about partnerships. Again, early on, make sure that you talk to your prospective partners and form those partnerships early. Don't just pick any partner. I mean, it needs to be a meaningful partnership. It needs to be a partner that brings something good to the project, that has an impact, right? When you have your project, you kind of know where your gaps are, where are your weaknesses, where do you need to bring a partner in that would help to get this thing off the ground. So that's where it comes in, that you actually need to know the mission of your potential partners and seek input from them for the application. This goes back to the point starting early and not writing at the last minute, especially if you want to have input from your partners. And make sure that your partners are aware of the entire project and not only their specific role in it, because then they can provide meaningful input. Some applications, grant applications, require support letters or letters of commitment. Again, no form letters. And early on, Have your organizations that you ask the letters, that you ask to provide these letters, put in there what specific activities their organization will support for the project. Start early with the letters, because people need to have time to think about what they're writing. It's not that easy sometimes, right? Especially if you ask for commitment letters for, let's say, for dollars, for money, that they are supposed to bring something in on their side. And the quantity doesn't make up for lack of contents. So you can have 10 letters, that's fine, but if they don't really say anything, that's not so good. All right, budget. That's another big topic. So a budget needs to be realistic, right? I mean, you cannot just pull numbers out of thin air. You need to do research here too. What do things cost? I mean, what do I actually need to put in here for the project to be successful? It needs to be reasonable, the budget. It needs to make sense to a reviewer who has no idea exactly in detail maybe what you want to do here. And it needs to be tied to the project per se, really, really well. That means you have realistic cost estimates. Again, not pulling numbers out of thin air. A realistic timeline and an implementable timeline. A lot of budget tables, and sometimes there are tables that you need to fill out for a budget in a grant application. They require you to put the costs per unit in there. So be as specific as possible. If it asks you for travel, don't just say, hey, I need $100,000, I'm gonna travel. People think, gosh, he or she's going to Hawaii or somewhere, right, in the middle of winter. So you need to make sure that that they understand what your travel is for. How many people are gonna go? How do you get there? So put the details in there, itemize as much as possible. Same for supplies. There are a lot of grant applications that say, oh, I need $500 for supplies. As a reviewer, that doesn't tell me a thing. You need to tell me what do you need these supplies for, right? So always correlation to tasks and activities. Here's a budget table example. When an application asks you to put a table in there and they give you a table in the actual guidelines, use it. Don't cook up something on your own, would be my recommendation. So on one side, here on the left side, you have the budget categories, and then you have the project tasks. And obviously, it's up to you to define what these tasks will be, depending on what you want to do. But you see on the right-hand side, the totals for the project categories, the individual ones, and on the bottom, you see the total budget for the task. Make sure that in this very box here on the right-hand lower side, that the numbers add up vertically and horizontally. You wouldn't believe how many budgets I've seen where people didn't do the math correctly, and that makes a bad impression. For the Brownfields grant specifically, and this is new for this year, items costing less than $10,000 are considered supplies. It used to be $5,000, this year it's $10,000. And equipment is generally not required for Brownfields grants, unless you have a very, very, very good reason to stick equipment in there, and usually you don't. So project tasks, what can you do? So you identify the tasks, the activities that needed to be accomplished for the project to get off the ground, to be successful. You make a list of what all that is, and then you group them somehow, however you see fit, into major tasks. So here are some examples. You could have project management, administration, you could have planning, you could have community engagement, you have contractual. Those are project tasks. The big outline, the big headers. Now, under these headers, you break it down a little bit more. So project management would include report preparation, any type of internal project meetings. You may want to meet with your contractor. You have the money for contractor procurement in there, expense processing, all that goes under project management and probably more. So these are just examples. For assessment and cleanup activities, brownfields, so this would be also could have project meetings with your contractor and the actual activities that the contractor performs for your project. Community engagement, I'm not sure where that's in there. planning of the event, the preparation of materials, the execution of the event, follow-up. All that could go under there. And then there's usually another category where you put eligible, bold, underlined, with exclamation marks, eligible programmatic expenses. And usually the guidelines will tell you what falls under there. So that could be travel, that could be conference registration, for example. Here's a budget example from an EJ grant application. Little bit different format, but the same thing, right? You have the task, now you have like the descriptions under the task, and you have the dollar amount. So again, different agencies have different budget tables that they put in the application package, in the guidelines. This is one from a brownfields cleanup grant from last year. And you see it's a little bit more involved, but basically it's the same thing. You have your budget categories, you have your project task, you have your totals, and that's that. Very prescriptive, so cater to that. Yep. There, measuring progress. Sometimes that's a stumbling block for communities who fill out grant applications. So you need to have a plan as to how you measure progress for the project that you hopefully will get funding for. Get this away here. So you need to track what you do. That's really what this is about. You need to evaluate your progress. Where can you do better? And you need to document the grant funds that are spent in a timely and efficient manner, because that's what a grantor would like to see. You're getting money from them. They want to know what you do with it, when, and how. So there are tracking softwares out there that you can use. You can just use the progress reporting, for example, to EPA, to HRSA, whatever, to measure your project, ACRES for EPA, schedule team meetings internally and externally with contractors. All those are tools for you to measure progress as to how you do. Because remember, you have a finite source of money and a finite source of time to accomplish what you need to do. Outputs versus outcomes, a lot of times also a stumbling block. Outputs are what you produced over the term of your grant, your activities. Outcomes are the impacts, the long and short-term results of these activities. So at the bottom, that little schematic, you have your inputs, activities, outputs, work products like, I don't know, reports, number of meetings, number of sites assessed, number of cleanups completed. And the outcomes are then how do these activities impact your community? Again, some examples here. We don't need to go through all of these. Some applications, some grant tours require you to specify between short-term, medium range, and long-term impacts. Just again, read the guidelines carefully. Usually they give you examples too. So here's an example from environmental justice grants. They use the logic model, but it's pretty much the same thing with inputs, outputs equals impact. So you have your, in this instance, like the resources, what you invest, the activities, what you do, the outputs, what is the product. In this case, they added audience, and then here they have short-term outcomes, intermediate outcomes, and long-term outcomes. And then there's another example. Whenever you see something like that in the guidelines, make sure you use those specific tables and fill them in. Again, don't cook up your own. So that's another example. You can really read through that if you want to on the website where the presentations are posted, and yet another example, but you kind of get the gist of it. And here they explain a little bit more short-term, 6 to 12 month, medium-term, 12 to 24 month, and long-term, 2+ years. Again, agency specific. Timelines, very, very important. Needs to be in every application. How you do that, a lot of times that's specified in the application. The example I put in here is a grant that I was involved in. That was an EPA grant, not a brownfields grant. This type of thing to put in an application, again, it depends. Sometimes it has a place, sometimes it doesn't. For EPA brownfields grants, this kind of schematic doesn't have a place because it takes away too much space. So what you want to do in an EPA brownfield grant application, and maybe some other applications too, you have your different tasks where you explain what you do, and then you put task 1 will go from, like, say, quarter 1 through quarter 4 of the first year, or you can accomplish it in 1 quarter. But that way you can make it shorter. You don't have to have something like this in here. That's just an example, but you want to hit the milestones in your applications. When do you accomplish what during the granting period? So this is a work plan for an EJ grant. Remember in the very first slide I said some agencies, the work plan is the actual application. For the environmental justice grants, it is. There's more to that than this one table because you say it says Appendix 1, sample work plan, but that's a big, big part of it. So here you have your tasks, cursor here. Task 1, description of activity to accomplish task, project staff, start end dates. So that basically would be your timeline here. So again, it kind of depends on the grant requirements. So work plan after award, that's for the EPA brownfields grants. Basically, it's a refined and condensed version of your proposal if you're successful. And your EPA project manager will work with you cooperatively once you are successful to develop this work plan. Whatever I highlight in purple here is usual in table format. The rest you can cut and paste from your actual application with maybe some modifications. So from here on out, I'm just going to hit some things that I think some people may miss in an application. Sensitive populations. EPA wants you, for the brownfields grants and the EJ grants, cater to sensitive populations, right? So you need to know what is included here. So children, elderly, minorities, women of childbearing age, people in poverty, all part of sensitive populations. That means you also need the statistics for these groups in your application. What's the percentage of elderly in your community? What's the age range, right? Like, is it over 80? Is it from 65 to 100 or something like that? Put those statistics in there. Same for minorities. There are a lot of applications who say, in the beginning, when they talk about their community, we have, like, say, a high Hispanic population in our community. Later on in the application, you never ever see a number associated with that or a percentage number. It never says 50% of our community is Hispanic. So you need to have those in there. From the statistics standpoint, use the latest available. If you mention a number in your application, make sure you have the appropriate reference with it. Don't just say 50%. Say 50%. This is the source. Like, say, I got it from whatever, from the census data or whatever, and give me the year. So, and if there are no really recent numbers available, sometimes that goes for the health data. Like, say it's 2025, and I have a number in there from, I don't know, 2019 or something. Just, you can use the number, but what I would recommend, put a justification there as to why you're using that. And that is usually because no other data are available yet. And go beyond the usual sources and do your research. Call your health department. Some health departments are really good with providing information. Some not so. But again, that goes with the research and starting early. For census data also, it kind of depends what you use, right? Because you want to have a competitive application. So in this slide, you have city data versus census block data. What I highlighted here is like you have the same selected variable, but the percentages are different if you look at the whole city versus census blocks. So again, you need to be kind of cognizant of the fact that there are differences. And some may be more competitive for an application and some are not. Like, for example, if you look here, the unemployment number on the right for the city data versus the unemployment for the census block. I mean, there's a big difference here. So you need to pick the numbers that are more compelling. Not to say that you pick a census block where you're not working in, right? Like if you have a large city, that usually is not the way to go. But like, look where your sites are, look where your project is. And then if it makes sense, hone into the census block area for that particular area. So you need to compare. Again, that takes time to do that, but make sure you don't neglect that. Programmatic capability. This is what granting agency wants to see, your organizational structure. Are you capable as an organization to handle the amount of money that they will potentially give you? And how is your organization organized? Competent and efficient team throughout the granting period. That goes into having backup plans. If you list a project manager, what happens when that project manager leaves or gets sick? Is your project grinding to a complete stop at that point? Or do you have a backup plan that somebody else can jump in and kind of continues throughout? So you want to make sure that the grantor understands that you have continuity in your staff as much as you can, and you will make sure that everything runs smoothly. You need to describe your staff, their experience, and their qualifications. A lot of times for like the financial aspect, I mean, you need to have some sort of accountant, right? To make sure that the money is actually tracked and efficiently spent and you have all the documentation. Don't just give a name and put /accountant. You need to make sure that that person has actually the experience that a grantor is looking for. So there needs to be some financial or professional background for that person, like a financial background, or they need to have been into, I don't know, an accounting position for some period of years to make sure that that is actually all covered. Additional resources, do you have them or do you need to acquire them? That again goes to the fact, can you pull this project off? Can you make your grantor, your granting agency happy? And then most granting agency want to know, have you successfully executed similar grants? And by that, I mean similar in the order of magnitude of money received. So if you list grants like say, oh, we got like $500 from this nonprofit organization to plant some trees, for this grant, we're asking for $1 million. I mean, that's too much of a discrepancy. So see if you can, don't have that. Let's see what else I have. Tracking, we already talked about that. Check your timelines, be clear on the deliverables, federal procurement requirements. That goes for contractors too. A lot of times you need to hire contractors for a project. Federal grants have federal procurement guidelines. You cannot just hire your brother or your cousin, right? I mean, there needs to be a process. Make sure you're aware of that and follow that. And then throughout the grant, always work closely, my recommendation, with your project manager. They can help you out a lot, and they are very willing to do that. So these, I'm not going to go through that. I just wanted to have them for you as resources. Again, the presentation will be on or is already on the K-State website where you registered for this workshop. Health impact data. A lot of times communities stumble with this topic, and there are a lot of resources out there. All these links are current. I checked them. So this can make your case, it can shore up your case, right? The need of the community. Public health data, lots of things here too. Environmental data. If you need environmental data, don't forget your state environmental agencies or EPA per se. or economic development agencies, especially for smaller and rural areas. A lot of towns have blight studies. Blight studies relate to brownfields, to community need, master plans, comp plans, all that sometimes has a lot of environmental data in it. The last one here, we have a presentation on that, CGEST and EJ screen, very, very important for data, statistical data. Final tips. Follow the current guidelines. Clear and precise and concise. No typos. Read your application, like Myesha said, print it out and really read it. Sometimes when I type along, I make a mistake and automatically Word converts what I wanted to say into a totally different word that doesn't fit there, right? Don't have that. Make sure your budget adds up. Compare your sections against the evaluation criteria that the agency puts out and write to that. Don't forget anything. Font requirements, page limitations, as Myesha said, if the application is supposed to be 10 pages, you submit 12. The last 2 pages will not be reviewed. Respond to all criteria and questions. If there's something that doesn't apply to you, say it. Careful with tables. Tables take up a lot of space. It always sounds like I'm writing 10 pages, it's, oh my God, 10 pages, you know, I don't have that much to say. And then you write, and all of a sudden you're at 20, and then you need to cut, and that's hard. So just kind of always be aware of that. You will fill the pages of an application. Don't ever be afraid of that. Usually you do end up cutting things. Don't assume a reviewer knows your community or region. I mean, that means don't, in excruciating detail, describe where your community is located geographically or something, but just something big. Like if you are located by a big river and that river floods, that's important. You know, if you are located by, like, say, a mine, an active mine, that's important too. So kind of think outside, like as an outsider to your community, what would you need to convey? Have your proposal reviewed multiple times. Give it to your spouse, your significant other who knows nothing about what you want to do. If they understand what you want to do and how you want to do it, then you're golden. If there are questions, not so much. Can't be a last-minute effort. Yeah, I already said that multiple times. Start very, very early. Participate in grant-related webinars. If you need some clarification, call the granting agency. They can answer questions. That goes especially for threshold, like especially for the brownfields grant, you need to pass threshold for somebody to actually review your actual grant application. Any threshold questions, individual ones, EPA can answer right now. Nothing else. Don't wait until the last minute to submit. Yeah, I've been on that wagon here. We wanted to submit an application, a big one that was multi-million for a grant, and waited too long because it had to go through internal review too, through K-State, and then grants.gov crashed. And it was like, I mean, we made it, but really by the skin. It just, yeah, it was not good because, I mean, there was so much work tied up in it and so much money, and then you have something happen like that. Avoid it if you can. Don't wait until the last minute. Unfortunately, a lot of people do, and then the pipeline into grants.gov gets clogged up anyhow. So grants usually are due on by midnight. So as of 5 p.m., you know, people are kind of trying to shove things through. We have a tool, K-State tab, called Tab Easy that helps with writing EPA brownfields grant application. Goes cleanup, assessment, and revolving loan, and the multi-purpose grants. So that is a tool you can use. It's free, and we can talk about this later a little bit too. I have some brochures on the back table, but that's a good resource. All right, so to sum it up, a good application is cohesive, concise, and an easy read. Don't bore your reviewers to tears, and don't ramble, please don't. It's a compelling story that engages the reviewer and makes him and her want to help the applicant by providing the requested funding. So that doesn't mean you need to write a sob story, right? But you need to have the facts in there, but it needs to be compelling. Now remember, grants are very, very competitive. Okay, here's my contact information, and I also put Maggie on there. Maggie is here too. Maggie is the Senior Director for TAB and also the TAB Regional Director for EPA Region 7 and 8. And she also has a lot of experience with grant review for the EPA Brownfields grants. Any questions? I know it's a lot of information. That's why all of this is on the web, and we are always available for questions that come in later on. We'll be here all day long, obviously, since I'm moderating. But even if something pops afterwards, don't hesitate to call or email, and we'll be happy to help you. For the EPA grants that are open right now, we can answer a lot of individual specific questions, which EPA cannot at this time, since they only can answer threshold in an individual setting. Okay, clear as mud. Beaucoup. Okay, so nobody in the room has questions at this point?
All right, we've been having a robust discussion
Oh, dear God.
online. So first, the question was, what are good sites to obtain data resources besides the health department? And then you had a couple of slides that gave us some extra sites. Some folks were discussing some other options, like maybe checking school district info for % of free and reduced lunch.
Yes, absolutely.
And also options like checking with your state agencies, because some states may have some unique data sources or repositories with the different states may have different things available.
Right.
So,
So the list I gave you there, I mean, that's obviously not exhaustive, right? I mean, there are other things that you want to look at, like Jennifer said right now.
yeah, so we've kind of been having this chat.
Okay.
And
Stand on a freaking event.
so really what we were saying is that it kind of depends on what story you're needing to tell and how you want to augment that story. And if there's any other questions online, zip it forth now. That is the summary of our chat that we've been having online, but folks were very intrigued by the data and storytelling that is important on the data side and how to convey that.
Right. I mean, data, I mean, I would say that's very, very crucial for an application. And that's a stumbling block a lot of times too. So yes. And if there are more questions, I mean, from online too, as I said, I mean, this is like an all day, well, most of the day event. And in the afternoon, there will be time for more in-depth questions too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, all good regarding questions? Yes? She's nodding, I think. Yep. Okay, well, I think we're going to have a 5-minute stretch break now. So I don't have a, what time is it? What time do we want them back? In 5? I thought, geez, 2:52. So right now it's 10:52. So if you come back, be back like 11:02. Let's make it, right? 11:02. Don't forget the 02. That'd be great. For participants here, there's coffee there in the next room. Unfortunately, we cannot do that for online participants. But yes, see you in a little bit. Thanks, Ann. All right, we are back. Everybody is back here. I think hopefully everybody's sitting in front of their laptops again online. So next up is, it's going to be actually exciting. It's going to be Joanna Miller from HUD, from the HUD Healthy Homes. and she's going to talk about the HUD Funding Navigator. It's a great tool to find out about HUD grants and all the different types that are out there, how much they're worth, and so on and so forth. So, Joe, if you're ready, I will turn this over to you. Open them up.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the EPA Regional Office, Region 7, and to the Heartland Grant Writing Workshop organizers for inviting us. And I really appreciate the federal partnerships here with all of the different agencies, learning from each other and helping our grantees braid funds, learn from each other, and get the opportunities to make the most impact in their communities. All right, so I'm here to talk about the Funding Navigator, and the Funding Navigator is part of our Build for the Future effort, and the Build for the Future program empowers local communities to undertake initiatives. It's there to offer guidance and materials and foster peer-to-peer knowledge sharing. It is on our HUD Exchange website. And that is not the HUD.gov, that is HUDexchange.gov, and there's links in my presentation so you can go there. We have a variety of different resources there, a lot of data on that page, so speaking of data, I do have some other resources for data, so I loved that conversation that we were having earlier, and I'm glad that you guys are all curious about that. All right, so let's talk about this new tool that we have. Again, Build for the Future Funding Navigator. It was launched in the fall of 2023, and the purpose of the Navigator is to help HUD partners locate funding across many federal agencies for a variety of project types. Major Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law programs are listed, along with existing HUD programs. That can be layered with the IRA and the BIL programs in project budgets for a range of related project types that the Navigator covers. Now, the Navigator serves a variety of audiences, from housing authorities to housing owners, and typically associated with HUD cities, states, and nonprofits. Now, that was the description early on. The Funding Navigator has matured over time and includes many of the EPA grants, environmental justice grants, and more, which you will see. So you see here, and I know this is small print for those of you in the audience, and those of you on your computers, it might be small as well, and maybe you can zoom in, but in the project type, I've typed lead in healthy homes. And I did screenshots here as we talked earlier. Sometimes videos don't work in this type of scenario, so I just did some screenshots. So I've typed in lead in healthy homes here, lead hazards in housing, and I typed a local government, and I did state, territories, Missouri, I did Kansas as well. I did competitive grants and chose for the funding stage, NOFOs, not open and open. So you can see here I got 18 results, and I can export those results. For those of you that have grant management software, you can import those results into your grant management software, which can be very helpful. These are the grants that came up, and you can see here some of those are part of the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes grants, which I'm with the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes Office of HUD. We have our technical studies, which is a research grant. We have a lead and a healthy homes technical studies program that just closed. We have an older adult home modification grant program. Now on here, you'll see that it says 2022. Whoops, I don't know why that came down. And that actually just opened up two days ago. So the screenshot came before that. And then a weatherization enhancement program, which is not in our office. But all of those came up for lead and health. So on this, I do want to say that there's an update to the app that's coming. And as you can see here, it's not always correct. So be sure to look, if you see where that red arrow is, it says that this particular grant, this Healthy Communities Grant Program, you look for it and it's in Region 1 in New England, when in fact I did not search that area. I searched specifically for Missouri. So there are some updates coming, but you can see that we did get some applications that are available still open for November. We have an environmental justice and climate justice program open, and all of those, again, were tagged for lead and healthy homes. Lead and healthy homes are environmental justice issues, and one of the things that you don't get in your search on grants.gov is some of the nuances to this, that your programs, when you have an environmental justice focus, you might not be aware that there are EPA programs, there are HUD programs, there are other CDC programs that fall under these topics that are part of your mission. All right. You can also search by keyword, and here I searched by tribal grants, both by eligibility and type of grant, and there were a variety of different grants that came up. So you can look at funding communities, brought up a variety of opportunities, some that were open, some that were forecasted to be open, and we talked about that. Somebody talked about that earlier. Forecasted to be open in 2026. It talks about eligibility as well. Now, as you mentioned earlier, that data is important. HUD has a lot of data tools that you might not be aware of. We have data tools and resources on our HUDuser.gov portal. We have programs and operations data, housing data, a variety of different data. We also have our HUD GIS open data page. So I put both of those links in here for you so you can easily access them. There you go. And this is just one example of how you might find some of the data. If you were looking for lead data, I put Kansas in here. I looked up what type of data might be available on here, and we got deteriorated paint index by tract, by state, and by county. So if you were applying for a lead and healthy homes grant or a lead hazard control grant, and there was a question about what is the, what kind of problem do you have? What challenges do you have with lead hazards by census tract? How are you targeting your work? You would have this data to show why you're targeting a particular area, whether it's a city or a census tract, and you would be able to use this data. So you may not know that that's available to you. All right. So of course, right before I came here and I asked the folks that are working on the Funding Navigator to provide me with some information, I've worked closely with them to get our grants updated. They said that they were launching an update for the Navigator. It is going to be updated tomorrow. And so the screenshots that I've shown you may look a little different when you go in there tomorrow. It's going to be a great update. And again, it is launching, if you are not aware, there is a Climate Week event going on this week in New York, and we're preparing to talk about it at Climate Week, and so hence the date of September 26th. Big push for that. So this is my contact information. I put, again, some links down here at the bottom, both for our office and for the Build for the Future site. I'm happy to answer any questions about our data sets and the Funding Navigator.
I actually have a question, if nobody in the audience has one here. How often do you update and how, like the lead data, for example? What I've run into is that lead data are kind of dated a lot of times, right? I mean, how recent are the ones? Okay, is that any better? Sorry. So I was asking Joe how often the HUD Navigator tool is updated, if that's annually, or is it just like, whenever something new crops up? And the second part of the question was, especially for lead data, how recent, how current are those data? Because I know sometimes that's like pulling teeth, getting recent lead data for specific states or even for specific communities.
Great questions. So the Funding Navigator is updated on a regular basis and pulls from different agencies as well as the grants.gov. The different agencies provide more detail and tags for their grants. So we reach out to those agencies, and our offices provide those tags like environmental justice, healthy housing, lead, to give more information about those grants. So it's a better searchable tool. And as far as the lead data, one of the tools that we have, and I've provided links to that, and it is on the data sets that I have in there. We have the American Healthy Housing Survey, and that is part of the census data. We just updated the American Healthy Housing Survey 2, and so that is recent data. It is on the site. I believe that was updated in 2023. And so you should have some really great information about HUD data. And some of those links actually will be in my next presentation this afternoon to the new lead data. So, great. You bet. Yes.
From online, we have a question. Can you show where within was the data in the Funding Navigator site?
I'm going to guess at this question.
I was trying to understand
Any
the
clarification
question.
and context? So whoever asked that question, if
Yeah,
we
Dawn,
don't guess
maybe,
this.
help us understand the question. Where within was the data in the Funding Navigator site?
Sure. So in this searchable tool, again, you can see down here that I have the words at the bottom. Maybe I can do my little pointer down here because I filled in these elements in the Funding Navigator. Filled in lead and healthy homes. These are drop-down lists. So I can choose from the drop-down. So you can see the little arrows here. And then once I did that, it showed me that I had 18 results. When I went to the results, these were some of my results. So it comes up and it looks like this table. And this is where it is. Online, in a table, or you can download it in that table. Does that answer your question to the person who asked for that information? The link that I provided in that last slide is, oh wait. The link that I provided gets you to the Funding Navigator, and you'll be able to use that tool. Did that answer your question? Oh, and each of these does take you to the individual notice of funding availability. You can see here that you can click on the grants.gov link, or if they're on a different platform, this one has the infrastructure exchange energy.gov here for this particular grant. So we do have the where to apply, the eligible uses of funding, and the funding stage. So you have your funding type. I had searched for competitive funding. There are other funding types that are available in the Funding Navigator. I just happened to search for that type.
Yeah, she said she figured it out.
Oh, great.
So apparently play with the Navigator, everyone, and
Yes.
you'll find some cool stuff.
Yes, you will. And on HUD's websites, we do have a feedback link at the bottom that is live. If there is something that you want to provide feedback on, whether it's the Navigator or something else, please do. The folks that are working on the Funding Navigator are extremely responsive, and we will be doing some more presentations and looking for feedback, especially from grant professionals and those working with this tool, on how effective it is, whether or not you're finding it useful, and what suggestions you have to make it more useful for you to find the specific data and grants that you want and need.
And I guess we're all challenged to check it out tomorrow.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce Matthew Lee, our next speaker. He's going to talk about the EJ Screen tool, which I just said it's nearly a requirement to use that for EPA grants. I mean, it's in the guidelines, so don't omit that, mention it, reference it, and also use CGEST, which I think is an overlay right now also on EJ Screen, so you get a 2-in-1 here. And Matthew Lee is with EPA headquarters in DC, so he's going to present virtually. He's an environmental protection specialist in the Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights. So,
Are we advancing his slides or is he?
I don't know. Matthew, can you hear us? Are you advancing your own slides, or would you like one of us to do that?
Hey, this is Dana. If he joined virtually, I don't see him or I can't identify him. So you might want to make sure he's joined.
Maggie said he did.
So he's not on yet? Is it 11:30? Because I think that was the time that was provided when he would be on.
We're 7 minutes out. Okay.
Well, in that
We
case,
can have a cool discussion about data.
there we go, exactly.
We can have
So
a brainstorm.
don't forget everything I just said, because I don't want to say it for the third time, right?
So here are some thoughts that Jennifer wanted to share so far on things that I've heard, just that I wanted to share. So when Sabina was talking, she was talking about measurement, and it just occurred to me, because it's at the end, and usually people have been writing and writing and writing and writing their grant. And they've got like 2 lines left on their page count. Seriously, maybe I'm overestimating or I'm being a little bit exaggerating, but you don't have much room left to write on your grant. But then, I've got to write my measurement stuff. Sometimes people just like throw every kind of measurement they can think of in that measurement box. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. You don't have to measure everything in the kitchen sink when it comes to measure. Just because you can measure it doesn't mean you should measure it. What did you start your grant with as the big scary that you're out to solve? What is the thing that you want to tell your community you're trying to address? That's what you're going to measure and talk to your people about. That's what you're going to tell me in the end. You've got a plan for how you're going to tell people about your progress toward resolving that. Remember, you've got a through line. You're telling a story from the very beginning to the very end. And if your measurement stuff is putting the bow on that story, it's your measurement part is measuring the things that you started with. It's not measuring stuff because it's easy to measure. And it absolutely does include, I'm going to comply with all my grant requirements and I'm going to report in acres. I mean, that's a given. But you don't just measure stuff because it's easy to measure. And you don't do every measurement in the world. Measure what you started with. That's how you figure out what you're going to measure. Have I killed time? So, anybody have any other questions or things that have come up or thoughts about the data or work plans that we have had conversations with today? Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm new at this. I've never written a grant. But my question is, so like when you're doing your measurements or your stats or whatever, and you're working with contractors and so forth, and they're giving you probably estimates instead of exacts of what they are going to do or what the acres are and things of that nature. So you're rewarded money. So if you fall if you find that you don't need that much money after all, for that particular project, but then you may need more money for something else they're going to do, how does that work?
Really great question. That's a grants management question after the fact. So what you want to make sure that you're doing is that you're talking about things that are similar in the project. So like the contractor is, your project, you don't want to change the scope of your project in order to be able to use the money, right? You can't do something different, than what the project was intended for. But you could do an additional community engagement activity. Maybe they came in under budget on one thing. So maybe we can do an additional one of the things that we had already budgeted for. As long as you're still within the scope of your original plan, you could budget for additional, move a budget for an additional thing. And you would need to work with your project officer to make those kinds of changes. You cannot have a major change in scope in the project. You can't, suddenly add an air monitor or do something completely different from what the project was originally intended to do. In fact, like in brownfields, if you have defined an area that you're going to work in so specifically, you can't go outside of that area. That's why we like to make sure that you have defined, given yourself enough wiggle room to allow you to, if I have enough money to do assessment and I have this jurisdiction, I can, once I've addressed my target area, go someplace else in my jurisdiction.
On now? Yes, here we go. I just want to add, in general, granting agencies do not like to take money back, right? Keep that in mind. And as Jennifer said, don't do something totally new, but if there is something that still fits, always talk to your project officer. And before you do that, not that you get into hot water, but there should be an opportunity to shift funds around within your, yeah.
Yeah, we call it rebudgeting. We don't like to call it leftover. Saving money in one area to leverage that resource in another way to enhance part of the budget so you get more activities. That's a good thing. There's in grants management, you can move up to 10% across your budget categories without an amendment, but that's only if you've got your project officer buy-in and you're not talking about a project scope. So you can't just like willy-nilly, oh, it's under 10%, I can move it. No, it's not that, but you can have a conversation with your project officer about that. Yes. Can you repeat the question? Oh, yes. So the question in the room was, it's a good point. People in the room couldn't hear the question. So you're just wondering, what's Jennifer rambling about? The question was, what if your estimates were off once you get the grant? And maybe something didn't cost as much as you thought it would, so you have a little bit of money left. Could you use it for something else? And you've heard the answer. You could use it as long as it's not outside the scope of the grant, and you could move it to something else as long as you're working with your project officer.
And one thing that I think maybe we should add to that budget-wise, that is the other end of the budget. If you build your budget, build in contingencies. Because remember, with the EPA grants, there nearly is a year between when you apply and if you're successful, that you actually get the money. So costs could go up, right? Or maybe somebody was your contractor, or like some services that you were thinking of doing, they're not available anymore from the person that you got an estimate, and you need to go out for another estimate. So always, I would say, minimum 10%. Just build that in.
All right, Matthew, are you with us yet?
I am. Can you hear me?
Hooray, Matthew. We are thrilled to have you with us here at the Heartland Federal Partners Grant Writing Workshop. We have your presentation up. Are you able to advance it, or do you need us to advance your slides?
No, I can share my screen and advance the slides. Pull this up.
Okay.
All right, confirming you can see that.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to present EJ Screen to y'all. As I'm sure y'all are aware, EJ Screen is one of the tools that you can utilize to incorporate environmental justice information into your grant applications. So the way this will go, I have 40 minutes. I'm going to give a brief PowerPoint presentation just to do some level setting, bring everybody up to speed on what exactly EJ Screen is, some of the data sets that it entails and contains. And then I'm going to spend the majority of the time in an actual live demo of the tool. So to really show you how you can utilize EJ Screen to show off, different community characteristics and environmental burdens, health burdens, etc., and to utilize with your daily work, but specifically for grants. And I will, touch on the EPA IRA disadvantaged community layer, the new layer for the community change grants. I can talk about CGIST and how we've incorporated that into EJ Screen. So I have some good examples teed up, and I'll certainly leave time for questions, or if there's any sites or aspects of the tool folks would like to see during the live demo. I will certainly intend to leave time for that. So with that, again, just to level set with what is EJ Screen. EJ Screen is EPA's web-based GIS tool for nationally consistent EJ screening and mapping. And the keywords there are nationally consistent. We have coverage for the entire United States, including Alaska, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and even data for the other US territories. And what EJ Screen does is that it and features several different environmental and socioeconomic data sets, highlight areas where vulnerable populations may be disproportionately impacted by pollution. And as I'm sure I have to explain to nobody on this call, that gets at the crux of environmental justice, right? Your vulnerable population, your poor communities of color, linguistically isolated populations, communities on tribal land, who we know face burdens. And those are the exact type of areas the tool EJ Screen strives to highlight. And we primarily do that through three sets of indices. We have our EJ indices and our supplemental indices. And as the graphic here on the right kind of alludes to, indices are a combination of, again, socioeconomic or demographic data with environmental data, environmental burden data to highlight areas, again, where vulnerable populations face higher pollution burdens. Because we have 13 environmental indicators in EJ Screen, we have 13 different indices and 13 different supplemental index. One index for each of those 13 environmental indicators. We also feature 7 different socioeconomic indicators in EJ Screen. These are kind of your classic indicators of social vulnerability, but also EJ Screen does link to the American Community Survey that is issued by the census, and you can access literally over 1,000 different census data sets directly in EJ Screen. And then recognizing that EJ issues are more than simply the correlation between vulnerability and environmental burden, we round out the tool with a host of indicators on health burden, climate change, and service gaps. One of the really nice things about Screen is that is by no means a static tool. So we are constantly updating the tool. We just updated the tool in July of this summer, and all of those 13 environmental indicators were updated. So again, we are constantly featuring the most up-to-date data that is available. Nothing in EJ Screen is real-time data, but again, it's the best that is available, the most up-to-date that's available. Likewise, we're always featuring the most up-to-date census data. So right now, the EJ Screen is featuring the 2018 to 2022 5-year rolling averages of the ACS. And when the census updates next year, we will transition to the 2019 to 2023 5-year rolling averages of the ACS. We also feature that data at the highest resolution that it's available. So all color-coded polygons that you see on the map here are census block groups. The census block group is the most refined unit for which the Census Bureau releases detailed demographics. And since we at EPA feel that EJ issues are inherently local, you should be utilizing the most local data that is available, and that is the census block group. We do make our data available at the census tract level. You can do things like a city and county level report as well, but the common unit of analysis, the common geographic unit of analysis is the census block group. EJ Screen also serves as its own GIS library, so you can access over 100 different layers of community interest, every single EPA regulated facility, things like drinking water service area boundaries, cancer risk, information on colonias and unincorporated communities, information on tribal lands, and again, those disadvantaged community layers are all available in the Places tab, and I'll show you a lot of those during the live demo. Depending on your use of the tool, it can produce maps, graphs, and reports, all of which might be appropriate when you're looking at applying for different grants. One of the things that's required, for example, in the community change grant is a map of your project area, and you can do that in EJ Screen. And we've made it very easy to produce that map. But you can also generate reports. EJ Screen produces a really user-friendly 4-page EJ Screen report that you can literally generate within 4 clicks of the mouse, and it's printable and savable, and you can attach it to your grant application as well. In the name of transparency, everything within EJ Screens can be downloaded. So if you are your own GIS person or work with the GIS team, you can download all the EJ Screen data and utilize it within your own GIS system. And we have an EJ Screen API and map services associated with all that data. And if you don't know what those terminologies mean, don't worry about it, because you don't need any special GIS software or any special passwords or anything besides internet access to access EJ Screen. And we at EPA and our federal, state, and community partners all use the same exact tool with the same exact data. With that, I'm going to transition to the live demo, but I do want to highlight some of the other resources that we have available on our website. We have an entire website dedicated to EJ Screen. It has recordings of past training. So if you're looking for a robust hour-long EJ Screen training that really gets into the nuts and bolts of the tool and includes a live demo, that's available on our website. We make the slide deck, much like this slide deck, available for download. And depending on how techy you want to get, we make all the technical, information available as well. I'm not going to spend much time on those issues for this audience, but for this, I'm just going to dive right in to the live demo. I don't think I have to reshare my screen, but let me just make sure you can see. Can you see EJ Screen now? Check it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I did see a quick question in the chat. I can't check it at the same time but GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. It's basically a mapping software. So this is EJ Screen. If you type EJ Screen into your search engine, our website pops up and you can launch the tool directly from there. We are in version 2.3. Again, this is the newest version just released in July of this summer. In EJ Screen, we have housed all the data in the table of contents here on the left. We have split that table of contents into 4 different tabs. We have our Maps tab, which has a lot of different categories of data sets that I just went over in the slide deck, and I'm going to come back to these. We have our Places tab. This is where we have a lot of other different categories and community interest. We have our Reports tab. This is where you can generate one of those 4-page EJ Screen reports. And then we have a Tools tab as well. And this allows for slightly additional GIS capabilities like adding in your own data. We do know, we have a lot of powerful data in EJ Screen. We don't have everything. So if you have your own data sets, if you want to upload your project area, for example, if you have that in a shapefile, a geographic-based file, you can add that shapefile directly into EJ Screen instead of drawing. So that's available in the Tools tab. And again, I'll come back and show some of these other features throughout the live demo. But quickly, as we like to think, if you can utilize Google Maps, you can utilize EJ Screen. So you just type your area of interest into the search bar here. In this case, I'm going to go to Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas. And EJ Screen will zoom right to your area of interest. This can be as general as a city or a state, as specific as an exact street address as well. And since I know this is, particularly an audience looking for information on grants, one of the main grants that we have out right now are those community change grants. If you simply want to access the information on and determine eligibility on a geographic basis for those particular grants, that's going to be in the Places tab. We have disadvantaged communities, and you can add in either the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool disadvantaged communities or the EPA IRA disadvantaged communities. First, I'm going to focus on the EPA IRA disadvantaged communities. I will note for the community change grants, they are using a merged version of the 1.0 version of this map and the 2.0 version of this map. So you do want to add on this specific layer that is called out in the NOFO. Any of these grant applications, if they call out a specific layer, you want to make sure you're looking at that layer. So you do have to turn that layer on. And again, you can see how that highlights more of the area around Kansas State because it is merging 1.0 and 2.0. As I mentioned, the EJ Screen data gets updated on a yearly basis. And what they decided for the CCG grant was basically to any community or that was deemed disadvantaged when the NOFO was issued back in November continue to be, considered disadvantaged for the purposes, of the NOFO, of the competition, and they added in the new disadvantaged communities as well based on the new data. So this is a merged data set. So again, you want to make sure you're looking at the exact layer that is specifically called out in the NOFO. Now you can see the areas in orange that would be identified as and designated as disadvantaged communities. And again, you can use this layer specific to the CCG, but there's other grant opportunities that are out there as well that require maps. And you can use this layer to produce your map. So one of the things you can do in EJ Screen is in the reports tab, if you want to estimate your project area, you could actually draw that area. So I'm going to completely make this up, but let's just say your project area is this general area of Manhattan. You can trace that project area, double click there, and then come into EJ Screen and select print. You can actually print this project area directly in EJ Screen. And then there is your project map. You can add in other things, like different community landmarks, where different schools and hospitals, places of worship, we have parks. You do not have to add all this information in. It's, depends on what's relative obviously to your project. But we have tons of data sets available. If you're working with, public housing, and actually, yeah, okay, so there is public housing. That wasn't a layer I teed up for this demo, so I got lucky. But there are some public housing in the area as well. So again, we have tons of different data sets that may be of interest. I'm going to take those off. And again, this is a very easy way to add in your project area. We do also have, I'm going to clear this out. We do also have some other boundaries, in the tool. So in the tools tab, we do have the boundaries category. So let's say your project area is a specific zip code. You can actually add that zip code in. You can see in this case, there is Manhattan is contained in a much larger zip code. There is a smaller one here in downtown, it looks like. But there is, again, the larger zip code here. So if that was your project area, you can also, select that zip code, 66502, and you could look at information on that level as well. And so there's that. You can add in different congressional districts and city boundaries. So we have a lot of boundaries, but if they don't mesh up with your project area boundary, again, you can always draw that, either draw an area, draw a path if you're drawing a bike path. I know the contractor put together a good video on how to create project area map in EJ Screen, and they feature a bike path example. You can click add a path. You can literally add that path directly in EJ Screen. And if this, I'm making this up, but if this is your bike path, you can draw that in EJ Screen. If you want to put, you're talking about access to that bike path, and maybe you're looking a mile in each direction. You can put a 1 mile buffer around that, around that bike path. And again, you can come in here and print that map, make give it a title, choose what file format you want. I do recommend a little bit higher than 96 dBi. You might want, that's dots per inch, I think. You might want to go up to like 300. But, there's a lot of different functions you can do, directly in the tool. So basically we've made, and taken a GIS system and made it publicly available with tons of different data sets. So I have some other, you can also, I did also want to show, if you have, for example, you're putting in, I'm totally making this up, but you're putting in, cooling centers within your project area. Your project area is that larger zip code, and you're putting in a couple cooling centers. You can drop pins on the exact location of those cooling centers. So let's say you have one here, you can drop a pin, another one here, you can drop a pin. You have to click again, but you can drop another pin and you can identify, you can name those, cooling center, and you can add those to the map. So again, you can really highlight not only your project area, but the specific locations associated with it right in the EJ screen map. And again, in the tools tab, you can print that map directly from there. With that, I'm going to go over to Topeka and highlight some. Again, you can see the disadvantaged communities as designated for the community change grant in and around Topeka. In this case, I'm going to take this off because those again are specific to the CCG grants. There's tons of other grants that don't require the use of that layer. And one of the things I want to show in Topeka is we can come into the maps tab. You've seen the different, categories that we have here. In this case, we're going to look at something relatively simple, but very powerful. And that is going to be the geographic distribution of linguistically isolated or limited English speaking households. And you can actually see those households, or those block groups that have the highest percentile of limited English speaking households. And this is actually looking at a national comparison level. So this is compared to the rest of the nation, less than 4% of the nation has more limited English speaking households than these block groups in red here. And these might be one of the areas that you might want to then generate an EJ screen report. And that's one of the powers of having block group level data. You can take a general area like Topeka, right, and start breaking it down at the community level and seeing some of the very specific community characteristics associated with the people in these block groups. In this case, we'll again run an EJ screen report. You can select an area. I am going to select the block group, but again, you can see, you can select a census tract. You can select the entire city. You can select multiple block groups. In this case, I'm going to select this block group right here. Sorry, every time I go to Zoom, it messes it up a little bit. In this case, I'm going to select this block group right here, and you can click EJ Screen Community Report. I actually have this report preloaded. It takes like 15 seconds to download, and that can seem like an eternity on Zoom. Oh, sorry, maybe I don't have that. Is that this one? Yes, here it is. So we have the EJ Screen report downloaded. Again, you can print and download this report directly to your computer. You can see you're getting a really refined look at this community. 828 people, about a third of a square mile. In this case, almost 50% of households are limited English speaking households. And you can see per capita income. One of the really nice things about EJ Screen is that it doesn't just stop at limited English speaking households. It's going to give you a breakdown of those limited English speaking households. And you can see in this case, 100% of those limited English speaking those limited English speaking households are speaking Spanish. And over a third or almost a third of folks are speaking Spanish, in the home. So this can help inform things, like obviously like community engagement, but it can also help, right, visualize the community characteristics, when you're applying for grants. So that, again, just to show you how easy that was, once you have your area kind of identified, reports tab. In this case, you're going to do a block group level report. You just click it and click EJ Screen Report. So it's available right there for you. While I'm in Topeka, another example layer I want to highlight. There are I think some grants out there that do look at the climate and economic justice screening tool. EJ Screen and CGIST, the climate and economic justice screening tool, are different tools, right? CEQ created CGIST and EPA created EJ Screen. They are different tools. They're complementary tools, but they are different tools. CGIST is a designation tool, right? You go to CGIST to get a yes/no designation to, is this community disadvantaged or not disadvantaged for the purposes of implementing Justice 40. Because it's a designation tool, we can take that designation and build it into EJ Screen. And we've done that. So you, in the Places tab, again, in the designated disadvantaged communities, right where the EPA IRA disadvantaged communities are, we also have the CGIST designated disadvantaged communities. You can add those onto the map. In this case, I'm going to take off limited English speaking, but these areas in Slate are the disadvantaged communities according to CGIST. So again, you don't even need to go to CGIST to access, whether or not your community or project area is in a disadvantaged community according to that tool, because we've built it into EJ Screen. You can click, CGIST does track level designations, EJ Screen and the IRA level is doing block group level designations. But nonetheless, you can highlight those tracks and see what is actually kind of driving the designation. So in this case, CGIST had 8 different categories, and of those 8, 2 are meeting their criteria. For this particular block group, it's housing and legacy pollution. So again, all that is available in EJ Screen. If you want a CGIST map, right, you can print it in EJ Screen. It's available right there. It'll be included as, as a layer in the legend, and it's available. Let me just make sure I'm not running out of time. Should be good for a couple more examples and some time for question as well. I do also want to highlight, again, some of the other data sets that we have in EJ Screen. So in the Places tab, we have different tribal lands and indigenous areas. We actually have 12 different tribal layers built into the tool. I'm going to throw on the tribal lands layer. And in this case, you can see if it decides to load here, we'll give it 1 second. All right, sometimes that happens. You can just reload the tool really quickly and it should pop up. But let's just make sure. All right, tool is reloaded. Go back to the tools tab, add in the tribal lands. There we go. So if something like that happens, just reload the tool. There are glitches from time to time. But you can see these are going to be your federally recognized tribes that have reservations in this kind of, I don't know what color that is, light green. And you can click on the actual, the reservation itself and see, the name of the tribe, get some information that way. You can also see we don't just have the reservations, we have reservations themselves. We also have the off-reservation trust lands. So you do have to zoom in for this. So you can actually see, there are a couple of very small but important trust lands, directly outside of the reservation. And this is, again, some of the data that is available really just at your fingertips directly in EJ Screen. Another aspect that I want to kind of highlight last, I'm going to go to the Hutchinson area. This is, where you can access different, items. Then, we have the different socioeconomic indicators. You can look at things like, people of color. Maybe you want to do it, compare Kansas to Kansas, right? Not compare Kansas to the U.S. And you can, compare Kansas to Kansas for low income, for people of color, for low income. You can also look at things like health disparities, right? President Biden's new executive order on environmental justice, specifically adds persons with disabilities. And you can add that data into the tool, and you can see, at the state or actually this is all at the national comparison level for our health data. But there's areas, in and around Hutchinson that are in the 95th to 100th percentile for people with disabilities. Over a quarter of this particular block group, actually census tract, all of our health data is at the tract level. But over a quarter of the people in this particular census tract are reporting to have a disability. This is not just physical disability. This is looking at 5 different types of disability. If you ever want to know exactly what's in an indicator or where that indicator is coming from, all of our data sets have these little eyes next to them, little eye icon. You can click that little eye icon, and it's going to go directly to that indicator. So in this case, you're looking at 6 different disability types, and you can see what those are here. So hearing, vision, cognitive, ambulatory, self-care, and independent living are all incorporated into that persons with disabilities information. And this is where you can start adding, other information like, from our climate change indicators. And you want to see, where the areas that are experiencing the most extreme heat, right? And maybe then you can utilize this data, right? This is looking at the maximum days above 90 degrees, of which Hutchinson is completely contained. And maybe you can use the disability data to help inform, the location of cooling centers, and make them completely accessible to, to people with disabilities. Again, based on the data. And what EJ Screen really allows for is that, kind of data-driven approach. And specifically in the grant making context, it kind of allows you to help visualize, both the community characteristics and some of the burdens that they may face. And again, produce maps, graphs, and reports that can all be included in any of your grant materials, your application materials. So with that was, that's a really fast overview. I wanted to leave some time for questions though, and see if there was any specific aspects of the tool that folks wanted to see highlighted. I will note, I'm only an email away. If I can't get to all the questions, my email is lee.matthew@epa.gov. So with that, any questions? And I can take a look at, I saw some stuff in the chat. Sometimes it's hard for me to check the chat while I'm presenting, but I'll keep it up here. Let's see. What is the difference between Justice 40 and an IRA disadvantaged community? So Justice 40 specifically, the Justice 40 initiative specifically called for the creation of the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. So those CJIS disadvantaged communities, again, are available in the designated disadvantaged community layer. It really depends on your grant to determine which layer you might want to utilize to determine eligibility. The EPA IRA disadvantaged community layer incorporates CJIS. So it incorporates anything that is disadvantaged according to CJIS is incorporated into that EPA IRA disadvantaged community layer. We build upon that. So if to use a GIS term, that is the CJIS is our base layer, right? The Justice 40 communities are our base layer. And then we build upon that. Yes, the data is from the Census Bureau. Right now, you're looking at the 2018 to 2022 ACS. The difference between the 1.0 and the 2.0 data is for the IRA disadvantaged community layer is that the 1.0 layer was generated using 2.2 data, the old version of the tool. We've since updated that, and now the 2.0 uses the 2.3 data. Let's see. Well, let me check and see if there's any questions in the room before I keep going through the chat. Perfect. I see a lot of questions were already addressed.
So if there's questions from the room, The audio locally will have to unmute.
Just got that. Okay.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
All right. That's great. Earlier in the chat, there was a question about, can I upload Google Earth Pro data? I didn't know if you'd seen that one. That was early on.
I did not see that. Google Earth Pro data. I believe Google Earth Pro uses KML and KMZ files, and you can add those into EJ Screen. So you can, in the Tools tab, you can do add maps and data. You can either add map services. Again, this is where you can add in those KML or KMZ files, which is what I believe Google Earth uses, though don't quote me on that. I don't use those formats too often, but I think that's what they utilize. But again, there's a variety of different formats that you can add data in terms of map services, different shape files. Or EJ Screen is also linked to the Geo platform. So, Geo platform is like an online, library in the sky. So you have access to, there's, I think, like 1 million layers in here. You can access the redlining data, tree canopy coverage, other ecosystem services. There's so much information in the Geo platform. So we don't have everything in EJ Screen. We got a lot, but it's not everything. And there's other ways to access it. Again, in the Tools tab, add maps and data.
Great. One of the questions is the data from the Census Bureau. And I think you maybe addressed it at the very beginning, but there's a lot of stuff in EJ Screen. Where is the data from, Matthew?
Yes, all of the data, the socioeconomic data sets are from the 2018 to 2022 American Community Survey. So that is the census data. I will highlight, these are those 7 kind of classic indicators of social vulnerability. But also in the Tools tab, we have additional demographics. And this is basically pulling not every single one, but almost every single indicator from the 2018 to 2022 ACS. So you can start, looking at tons of different categories of information, all different types of, breakdowns. You can see, even like percent female head of household. There's so many other data sets that you can access in EJ Screen directly from the census ACS.
Your environmental data sets come from various EPA databases.
Correct.
Right. So it's not all.
It's not all EPA. Like the new NO2 data actually comes from NASA. This is looking at satellite data from NASA. Our lead paint indicator is looking at pre-1960 housing. This is coming from the census. So it's not all EPA data, but the majority of it, especially the proximity to EPA regulated facility data, is coming from EPA.
All right, then you offered your email, and there was also a question about, hey, could we work with someone at EPA to put the data sets together for the information for our grants? And I thought it might be an opportunity to clarify the role that EPA has in helping you write your grants, Matthew.
Yes, unfortunately, we cannot provide project-specific help, and especially with your application. But if you do have general questions about EJ Screen, again, certainly reach out to me. I can't create a project area map for you, but if you do have questions, I'm happy to help walk you through certain aspects of the tool. I will mention on our website, we do have an EJ Screen user guide that goes over how to again generate a report, how to add your own data, how to print a map. It literally goes step by step. If you have any technical questions, you can email ejscreen@epa.gov. We have contractors who can answer a lot of questions as well. So there's a variety of different ways to get information and feedback, but no, we cannot help with any specific applications.
Great. One last question. Can you explain the difference between IRA Disadvantaged Communities 1.0 and 2.0? Do both data sets need to be used for IRA grants?
So 1.0 is we have basically 3 different data sets available in EJ Screen for the IRA layers. I don't know why 1.0 is only popping up right now. Let me give. But basically, while this is reloading, the 1.0 layer was created in November of last year. That was when we were using version 2.2 of EJ Screen. We've since updated to 2.3, and then therefore we created a new IRA layer, right, using the 2.3 data. That's the IRA 2.0 layer. We then merged, specific for the CCG grants, we merged those 2 data sets. So anything that was previously designated disadvantaged when that NOFO was released in November of last year is still considered disadvantaged for that competition. So we've merged those data sets into what we're calling the Disadvantaged Community Environmental and Climate Justice Program. Again, that's a merge of those 2 data sets. So this is really the only map you need to consider for the CCG. But for any of the other grants, especially grants that have been issued since after 2.3 was released, it calls for it in the NOFO, but it's probably going to be referencing 2.0. But again, just make sure you're using the specific layer that's called for in the NOFO, and that CCG, the update to the CCG NOFO specifically calls out this layer here.
Great, thank you. I think that's it from the chat. Any last question? Going once, going twice in the room? We're good.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and also Monica Shirley Drew for answering some questions online.
Thanks all. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and shoot me an email. And yes, thanks, Monica. Appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And it's nearly lunchtime, but before we cut out, I just wanted to make some announcements. So this afternoon, we are going to hear from successful grantees. You're going to hear about like EPA grant programs and grant programs from federal partners, K-State TAB, TIC-TAC, all that good stuff. Before we get out, let me share my screen here if I can. Let's see if yes, here we go. So this is specifically for online attendees. I hope you can see that. I mean, we hope that you will be back after lunch, right? By no stretch of the imagination do I want to encourage you to not come back, but just in case, here is the evaluation link and the evaluation QR code, because as per usual, we would like to have your opinion on this workshop. So if you don't come back, please do so and fill this out today. It's very quick, short, easy. And if not, of course, if you do come back, do it in the afternoon. So 1:30 p.m., please be back.